Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm the Ember and today I'm going to be showing you how to model this keypad in Blender. So with that said, let's just jump into it. Okay, so I've opened up Blender and I have enabled screencast keys, so if I press a key, you can see it shows the key I pressed down here. Okay, so for this I'm actually going to save the default cube. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode, or go up here and switch to edit mode. Then if everything isn't selected, you can press A, and now with it all selected, I'm going to press GZ, and then just type 1 on your keyboard, and that will move it so it's sitting perfectly on the floor. Now I'm going to go up to face select mode, select this top face, select the top face, press G, and then we're going to press Z to constrain it to the Z axis. Then I'll type minus 1.4. Okay, now we have this. I'm going to press I with that top face selected. So press I, and that will inset the face a little bit. And something like this is fine. I'm just going to type in 0.15. Now I'm going to go to side view by pressing 3 on your numpad. If you don't have a numpad, you can click the X up here. Then I'll press Alt Z, and that will turn on X-ray mode. Then I'll press E and extrude this down to somewhere around about like this. So minus 0.5. Now I'll press Alt Z again to turn off X-ray mode. Now I want to bevel these edges, so I'm going to go to edge select all the edges by holding down Shift, and with all those selected I'll press Ctrl B, and you can see that is beveling. Now we can scroll the mouse wheel up to add more segments, and make sure it's not overlapping. If you go too far, it overlaps. So I might do something like this. That looks fine. We have a little problem here. You see, we can't really see this edge here, and that's kind of annoying when modeling. I want to be able to see all my edges. So there's a setting to fix this. If we go up to this drop down, click that, then we can go down and enable cavity. And then we can change the type from screen to both. And now you see it really separates the edges and it's a lot easier to tell where they are. Okay, that's looking good. Going to tab back into edit mode, and I want to select this whole top ring like this whole top ring. And to do that we can hold down Alt and just click that edge. Now with that selected we can press Ctrl B. And you can see it's kind of beveling at a weird angle. To fix that, I'm going to press Ctrl A and apply the scale. Now if we go back and try and bevel again, you can see it bevels more evenly. So I'll select the bottom one, press Ctrl B. That's good. I only want to give this one a small bevel. Okay, good. Then I'm going to right click and shade auto smooth. Okay, so now we have the case or box for our keys. So I'm going to press F2 to rename this object and call it base. So now we need to make the keys. So for the keys I'll add a cube. Then I want to be editing this cube separately. So I'll press the / button, which isolates this object so we can't see any other objects. Then I'm going to tab into edit mode, go to face select mode and select this top face and scale it down a tiny bit. Now I'm going to go over to the modifier properties and add a bevel modifier. I'm also going to press Ctrl A and apply the scale. I'll maybe make the amount something bigger and make the segments like 7. Then right click and shade auto smooth. Maybe we could even make this a bit bigger. Yeah, something like this should be fine. I'll unisolate this object and I'll name it key 001. I'll scale it down. So I'm going to add a array modifier and I'll set that to 3, and I'll scale this down and find a position that it kind of fits in and then move it up. That looks good. And now I'm going to add another array. We can leave the count at 2, but I'll make the x factor 0 and the y factor 1. Actually that needs to be -1. Okay, so now we need to make the spacebar sort of button. To do that, I'm going to duplicate these keys we already have, and I'll just right click to cancel the location. Then I'm just going to delete the arrays and move it down. Now I'm going to tab into edit mode, go to top view, go into vertex select mode, select these vertices and move it on the x-axis over here. I'll tab out of edit mode and move it a bit on the y-axis so it fits in there. There we go, that's our spacebar button. Now we need the little dial. So I'm going to press Shift A and add a cylinder. And then again I'll press the / button. That will isolate this object. And then I'm going to tab into edit mode, press Ctrl R. This will add a loop cut. And then I'll hover over the mesh and you can see there's a yellow line. This is a loop cut. Now if we click and drag this up, you can see it's adding a ring of vertices. So I'll put this somewhere around about here. Then I'll press Ctrl R again, and this time I'll scroll my mouse wheel up and that will add more segments. I'm just going to press escape to cancel that and go into X view again. Then I'll press Ctrl R again and scroll my mouse wheel up. Now I kind of want little cubes. I want little squares here. So if it's like this, you can see it's more of a rectangle, but I want it to be pretty even. So that looks like a good square. That's probably fine. So I'll click and then you can see we can move it, and then I'll right click and cancel that location. Now we have all those selected. I'll press Ctrl F. We now have this menu here, and I'm going to go down to poke faces. Click that and you can see it adds another vertex in the center of all those squares. Now with one of them selected, I'll press Shift G. I'll click amount of adjacent faces. Now you can see it selects all those vertices, and then I'll press Alt S and scale this out a bit. That might be a little bit too much. I'll just bring it in a bit. Something like this should be fine. Now I'm going to go back into edit mode, hold down Alt and select this top ring, press Ctrl B to bevel, and I'm going to scroll back the mouse wheel till we have no segments. And I'll do it something like that. That looks good. Now I'll right click and shade auto smooth. You might also have this issue that I have. You can see it's kind of like blending right here. The shading is blending. I don't really want that. I want a more distinct line. So to fix this, I'll tab into edit mode, select one of those vertices again, press Shift G, and click amount of adjacent faces again. You can see this time it selects this ring. I don't want that, so I'll hold down Shift and Alt and deselect that. Now I'll press Alt S, and you can see the shading change. So that should be fine. There we go, that looks a lot better. Okay, so now we have this done, we can press the / button again, and it will unisolate that object. Now I'm going to go into top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, or you can click the Z button on the gimbo. The gizmo. Or you can press the Z button on the gizmo. Then I'll scale it down and position it over here. This should be fine. I'll move it up. I kind of need to be poking up a bit. Something like this should be fine. Then I'm going to select that, go back into isolated mode. I'll press tab, and then I'll go up to face select mode, select the bottom face, and then I'll press the / button again to unisolate that object. Then I'll go into Y view, press Alt Z so we can see X-ray view, then GZ and move this face down. There we go. Now we have our dial. Okay, so now we need to add the cable. So I'm going to press Shift A and add a curve Bezier. Now I'm going to isolate this object again, and you can see we have a Bezier curve. I'll move this curve up, and then I'll go to top view, tab into edit mode, press A and then X to delete all the vertices. Now I'm going to go over to this side menu here, and I'm going to select this draw button. Now I'm just going to draw from the back of our keypad a line sort of like this. Okay, so now we have this Bezier curve. I'm going to press W to go back to our selection cursor. Now we can just adjust some of these points by selecting them, then pressing G and Shift Z, so it moves it on every axis but the Z. And something like this probably would be fine. Okay, that looks good. Now I'm going to go into Y view again, move it up to the center, somewhere around about like that. Then I'll go to the curve properties, to geometry, then to bevel, and I'll just make the depth something like 0.09. Should be good. Then I'll tab into edit mode, select these points, go into side view, and move it down. Okay, that should be fine. Now I'm going to add a mesh plane and scale this up. Okay, so now we need to add some materials to this. So I'm going to go over to the shading tab, and I'm going to go over to the render properties, and I'll change the render engine from Eevee to cycles. And I'll change the device from CPU to GPU compute. I'll also make the max samples in the render 212, and that should be fine for the moment. Now I'm going to go over to rendered view, click the drop down, and disable scene lights and scene world. Okay, so now we need to add some materials. I want to go for a minimalism sort of look, so I'm not going to use too many colors, maybe just blacks and whites. So at the moment, if we tab into edit mode, we can't select these other two buttons. And to do that, I'm going to go over to the modify properties and apply both these array modifiers. Now you can see we can select all different buttons. Now I'm going to hover over this middle one and press L. That will select the whole key. I'll do the same with these two, and I'll make a new material, and I'll call this key white. Then in this slot button here, I'll make a new slot and assign that material, and I'll call this key black. Then I'll make the color dark. Okay, so with this black material, we can now tab out of edit mode, go to subsurf, and turn the weight all the way up. I'll go back to the key white material, do the same with the subsurf, and I'll make the white color fully white. That looks good. Now for this dial, I'm going to make a new material and call this metal. I'll turn the metallic all the way up and the roughness down a little bit and make it darker. And then I'll make this base the same metal color, but I'll click this 2 icon here so it duplicates it. I'll make it a bit brighter so it's like a nice white metal. And then we can make the cable that same metal. So now I want to add a wood texture to the floor. So you can open up your browser of choice. I'm using Arc. Then just type in Ambience CG and go to ambientcg.com. Now I'm going to type in wood, and we can pick any of these. I think I'm going to pick this one, and I'll download the 4K resolution. Okay, so that's been downloaded. Now we can close the browser and open up your file explorer. So the file will be zipped. On Windows, you can select it, right click, and extract all. And then we can delete the zipped folder. Now we have this folder with the textures inside. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Blender, select the floor, click the new material button, and call this wood. Now I'll go back, and I'm going to select the color, displacement, and roughness. And then I'll drag that into Blender. Now I'll plug the color into the base color of the principled BSDF, and I'll plug the roughness into the roughness. And for the displacement, I'll add a bump node, plug that into the normal of the principled BSDF, and the color into the height. Now I'll bring down the strength a lot to maybe 0.4. Looks good. I'm actually going to delete the displacement and drag in the normal GL. And then plug that into the height of the bump. Now I'm going to add a texture coordinate node and a mapping node. I'll plug the mappings vector into all the other vectors of the images, and then I'll plug generated into the first vector. Now we can change the scale of all of these. Maybe minus 3.5 should be good. Okay, that's looking nice. Actually, maybe minus 4.5. Okay, that's nice. Now we need to set up the camera. So I'm going to go into camera view and then press Shift and tilde key. And this lets us control Blender like a game. So we can use the WASD keys to move around and the E and Q keys, and that lets us move up and down. And we can use the mouse wheel to control our speed. I'll just position that somewhere like this, and I'm going to go over to the render settings, down to color management, and make the look high contrast. Now if we go to this drop down and turn off scene lights and scene worlds, you can see it looks pretty different. That's because we're using the inbuilt Blender HDRI. You can swap between these HDRIs and find one you like. I actually like this one. It gives us a bit of rim light over here and over here. I want to use this for the final render, and we can actually get this pretty easily. So you can go down to the Windows icon, and then you can start to type in Blender, and you can find the version you're using. It actually doesn't matter, I am using 4.3, but 4.2 will have the same HDRIs. Then we can click Open File Location, and then right click on that Blender and Open File Location. Then 4.2, Data Files, Studio Lights, World, and then we have all our HDRIs here. Now if we go back, you can select this and hover over it, and it will actually show you the name. You can see it's courtyard.exr. If we go back to the File Explorer, you can see we have courtyard.exr. So I'm going to press Ctrl C and copy that, close this, and go back to our assets folder, and I'll paste that, Ctrl V, and then I'm going to go back to Blender, go to World Properties, and I'm going to click the little yellow dot on the color, and then choose Environment Texture. Then I'll click Open, find our assets folder, and then we can choose courtyard.exr, and then click Open Image. So now if we click the drop down and turn on scene lights and scene worlds, you can see it looks pretty much the same, except we have this dramatic shadow. So that is actually because we have a sunlight. We can just turn that off for the moment, and I might make this maybe strength of 2. That looks pretty nice. And I might select this case, duplicate the material, and see what it looks like dark. I think a darker metal would look pretty nice. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Maybe somewhere in the middle like this. Okay, this is looking good. So this is basically it. I'm just going to go up to compositing though and turn on use nodes and type in glare, and I'll set this to bloom. We can go back to shading, and nothing has really changed, so we can click the drop down and enable the compositor to always. You can see this is very bright, so if we go back to compositing, we can try fog glow and go back to shading. Now if we turn this from disabled to always, you can see the difference it's making. And we don't actually need this light, so I'm just going to delete it. Okay, so that's basically it. Now let's just click render. One thing I did notice is that it might have a little bit too much bump here, so I'll just cancel that. Select the wood, maybe make the bump 0.3. That looks better, and we can render again. That looks pretty good. So I hope you learned something from this tutorial and found it helpful. If you like this sort of content, make sure to subscribe and drop a like, and I will see you in the next one.